Hello, Jonathan Hedderly here, and today we're going to be discussing the psychological themes found in the film A Quiet Place. Psych Cinema is Shrink Tank's video series where I explore the psychological themes found in the films I watch and love. But before we get into the film, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the notification bell. That way you'll know when we drop new content. All of our material explores the intersection of pop culture and psychology. Now, warning, we are going to spoil the film in this video. So if you haven't seen A Quiet Place yet, pause this video, go watch the movie, come back, and then listen to the psychology that's found within the film itself. So in the film A Quiet Place, we see and follow a family as they attempt to navigate and survive in a world that has been attacked by some form of creature or alien. And those predators have a very acute sense of sound, which means in order to survive, humans have to be completely silent. There is looming threats all around, and so we see this family of four really struggle of growing up, staying together, but constantly feeling the threat and unease of if they make one misstep, that it could lead to death. And the film actually has a number of scenes where that happens, that it builds up that threat all the more. I really enjoyed this film. It's very entertaining. The acting is great. And a special shout out to Millicent Simmons, the actress who plays the deaf daughter in the film and who is deaf in real life. She is our entry point into a world where sound now has to be completely removed, because if it's not, it could mean the death of yourself or someone you love. But now let's start to look at the psychology that's wrapped around this story of this family and survival in A Quiet Place. And first and foremost, it's really a film about anxiety, dread, that constant tension and unease that permeates you as you always feel a threat that you can never let your guard down. You can never let your guard down in A Quiet Place because one sound itself can lead to an attack, can lead to your death. And we see this very early on in this family that experiences a horrific loss. And it's all the more apparent to them that they cannot make a misstep. And we see how this loss affects both parents and the children who just want to have a normal life. And a lot of that carefree nature that helps with development and growing up is lost in this world. And we see how it impacts the parents, played by Emily Blunt and John Krasinski, and how they have to constantly be watching over their shoulders what's happening with their kids, because if they can't protect their kids, they know what the consequences can be. And this really mirrors in a lot of ways our culture. We are living in an age of anxiety where people are just constantly stressed about every little thing. And we see how people's anxiety and stress can even warp their reality to where their mind is very vulnerable to catastrophizing or awfulizing or falling victim to black or white, all or nothing thinking. So we're seeing a lot of distortion in our culture that comes from living in a time of anxiety. And so with this story that's really about this constant threat, always feeling like danger is just right around the corner, we see that especially in how that informs the parents and how they interact with their kids. So this is also a film about anxious parenting, because we've stepped into a period of our time in American culture where parents are obsessed with their children.
No, I want one of those.
Bunker, how much do you want for the golden goose?
Children now have become the center of the family unit, and that has not always been the case. In fact, around the world, most industrialized cultures, kids are not at the top of priority in the family. They are important, but they're not the most important. When you look at American culture, it's not uncommon to see how the whole schedule of the family centers around a young person's responsibilities and their extracurricular activities. And it continues to reinforce this message of a child is the most important person in the family. And so how is that then going to kind of permeate down into how parents raise their kids? And we're seeing a lot of anxious parenting. We see helicopter parenting. We see parents that have to know everything about what's going on with their kids. We see parents that are using smartphones and other digital devices to be able to track where their kids are. And think about this, in the age of smartphones, if a parent texts or calls their child and they don't respond within a few minutes, it's not uncommon to see parents start to get themselves all worried about why they're not having that constant interaction and connection with their kids. Now, when we see anxious parenting, we also see a tendency for parents to want to shield, protect, and sometimes rescue their kids. And we see that in this film, A Quiet Place. On the one hand, they're trying to protect their kids, but on the other hand, especially with the oldest daughter, played by Millicent Simmons, is that to her own detriment, to where they're not really preparing their kids to deal with the day-to-day threats and decisions that have to be made in order to survive in this post-apocalyptic, post-attacked world. And we see the same thing in our culture itself, where parents, very well-intentioned and certainly love and care for their kids, but they're overprotecting them, and they're really preventing them from stepping into young adulthood, experiencing threats and failure. Now, in A Quiet Place, you can't really have the opportunity for failure, because failure means death. Where in American culture, we see a lot of parents, a fear of failure means my kid's not going to get into school. And if they can't get into school, then they're not going to get a good job. And then they're not going to have a family. And so we just sort of see again how that awfulizing and catastrophizing that happens in our culture. And it's not that uncommon, especially in my area as a mental health professional. So what do we see instead? We see avoidance. And that's really played out in the son's character, who is so afraid of the looming threat that even when his father wants to take him out and show him how to navigate some of the day-to-day decisions that need to be made, he is so afraid to go out where he knows these creatures are roaming. And instead, he would just rather stay sheltered, not get anywhere near the threats, the aliens themselves. And we sort of see how his way of dealing with anxiety and fear is avoidance. He wants to get further and further and further removed from the threats themselves. Now, both the parents in the film as well as parents in today's culture, it's really a juggling act for parents to figure out where that fine line is of nurturing, protecting, maybe even stepping in and intervening for your kids. And where's that natural, normal, healthy time where we allow kids to make mistakes? We allow them space to make decisions and hopefully learn from decisions, either learn from good decisions and how to duplicate them, or how to learn from poor decisions and be able to bounce back and learn from them and develop some grit and some resiliency in the face of adversity. Now, another aspect of this film that really is subtle, and it's actually come out more with some of the critiques and reviews of the film, is that A Quiet Place might be a subtle commentary on this age of technology and all of this noise that we are bombarded with in our culture, whether it be 24-hour news cycles, whether it be fake news, whether it be living in the age of hyperbole and exaggeration, or simply just being a tech-centered life now where everyone has smartphones and digital devices, and the average teenager spends up to 11 hours a day with some type of technology in front of their face. We are living in an age where there is a lot of noise and chatter. And so with A Quiet Place, you see this extreme example of what's it like? What's it like when you remove all that excess noise? And in order to survive, in order to have a fulfilling and long life, you have to simplify. You have to remove all of that excess noise. Now, in some ways, you could argue that A Quiet Place is criticizing modern life, and I think that there would be some merit to that, although John Krasinski himself hasn't commented that that was one of the guiding principles in wanting to make A Quiet Place, but it certainly can speak to our times where there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of polarizing arguing online, people's political views, and shouting over one another versus listening and creating an engagement and dialogue. But I think the film, in its simplicity, actually is arguing more about mindfulness, about really being present and fully engaged in the moment. And that's one thing that really technology can rob us of, because we are constantly entertained, distracted, or consumed by something that's remote and detached. Looking at everybody else's social media feed, reading news, whether it be real and authenticated or fake news on things like Facebook or whatever website that's just at, it's right there at the scroll of a finger. Whereas mindfulness is really this principle about staying fully focused and present in the here and now, because that's all you can influence. And in this film, with this simple existence, but also this crucial simple existence that you have to pay attention to what's going on right now, the film really makes a strong argument for mindful living. We see even in the film an example of a simple game of Monopoly where the pieces have been swapped out and replaced by cloth and things that don't make noise. When a child gets too animated and kind of exuberant, accidentally knocks over a lamp. And then the fear and threat sets in, because that noise can bring about unwanted attention. So on the one hand, this film may be commenting on the age of anxiety and feeling constant tension and threat and worry and fear of failure. On the other hand, it really promotes the value and benefits of really living in the moment and not having most of your mind either overly fixated in the past, overly preoccupied by what waits you ahead, and simply what's going on right in front of your face. So, and I think A Quiet Place does that in a really powerful way. It adds exaggeration and the stakes are higher, but you see how this family, even with the looming threats around them, they're able to appreciate some of the simple things of life, like a meal together, like a board game together, just sitting in a room together and not being constantly distracted by other outlets. And you see this family is happy and they're loving. And I think that the film makes a strong argument that that's something maybe we've been losing here in modern times. That's going to do it for this episode of Psych Cinema. What did you think of the film? Be sure to like our video and leave us a comment. Also, you can let us know if there's a film that you love and you want us to break down here in an episode of Psych Cinema. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and also check out shrinktank.com, where you'll find all types of resources, articles, quizzes, and polls focused on the intersection of pop culture and psychology. That's going to do it for this episode of Psych Cinema. We'll see you next time.